If dark stories keep you up at night, subscribe now, because this one tore a quiet street apart and nobody walked away innocent. The flashing blue lights painted the houses in cold color, turning the neat suburban block into something unrecognizable. Neighbors stood barefoot on their lawns, wrapped in blankets, whispering to each other as officers sealed off the cul-de-sac with yellow tape. At the center of it all stood House 14, the home of Daniel Reeves, the man who had vanished without a trace 48 hours earlier. Detective Laura Hensley stepped out of her car and immediately felt the tension. It wasn't just fear. It was suspicion. Every pair of eyes seemed to be watching someone else. Daniel Reeves wasn't the type of man people expected to disappear. He was predictable in a comforting way. 42 years old, accountant, divorced, friendly enough to wave but private enough to avoid long conversations. He walked his dog every evening at exactly 7:15. He paid his bills early. He never missed work. And yet his car was still in the driveway, his phone sat charging on the kitchen counter, and his dog had been found locked in the garage, frantic and dehydrated. Inside the house, nothing looked disturbed. The television was paused mid-show. A half-eaten bowl of pasta sat hardened on the dining table. His wallet was on the counter. No signs of forced entry. No signs of struggle. It was as if Daniel had simply stood up and walked out of his own life. "Someone knows something," Laura murmured, scanning the room. The first interviews only deepened the mystery. Mrs. Calder from House 12 claimed she heard arguing late Tuesday night. A man's voice. Angry. But when Laura pressed for details, the woman hesitated. "I don't want trouble," she said quietly. "This street, people talk." Across the road, Marcus and Elena Voss insisted they heard nothing. They described Daniel as quiet, maybe lonely. Marcus avoided eye contact the entire time. His arms stayed folded tight across his chest. Then there was the teenage babysitter from House 16, Lily Carter. She admitted she saw Daniel talking to someone by his mailbox around midnight. A figure in a dark hoodie. She couldn't see the face. "He looked scared," Lily whispered. "Like he didn't want to be there." That detail changed everything. Laura ordered a sweep of the neighborhood cameras. On the third house they checked, a grainy security feed showed Daniel standing outside under the streetlight. The hooded figure stepped closer. They spoke for less than 30 seconds. Then Daniel turned and walked back into his house. The figure didn't leave. The timestamp showed the hooded person standing motionless in Daniel's driveway for almost 5 minutes. Then the camera glitched. When the feed returned, the driveway was empty. No one was seen leaving. The entire street became a suspect pool overnight. Officers knocked on doors until sunrise. Old grudges surfaced. A property dispute between Daniel and the Voss family. Noise complaints involving Mrs. Calder. Rumors that Daniel had been secretly dating someone on the block. Every conversation seemed to carry a hidden edge. By morning, social media had turned the neighborhood into a spectacle. Reporters gathered at the barricade. Residents started accusing each other openly. Someone spray-painted "murderer" on a garage door before police washed it off. Then the forensic team found something. A faint smear of blood inside Daniel's laundry room. Not enough to suggest a violent scene, but enough to confirm he hadn't left willingly. The lab rushed the test. It was Daniel's blood. Laura felt the case tighten around her chest. A quiet disappearance had just become an abduction, maybe worse. She returned to the security footage, watching frame by frame. That's when she noticed a reflection in Daniel's front window. A second silhouette. Someone inside the house while Daniel was outside. The hooded figure hadn't come alone. A search warrant was issued for every home on the street. Residents protested. Some cried. Some shouted. One man tried to block officers from entering his basement until he was restrained. Hours later, a patrol officer radioed Laura from House 14. "Detective, you need to see this." Behind Daniel's washing machine was a narrow crawlspace door no one had mentioned. It was locked from the outside. Laura crouched, her pulse hammering. The metal latch was scratched, as if someone had sealed it in a hurry. The air leaking through the gap smelled stale. She nodded to the officer. He forced it open. Inside, illuminated by a trembling flashlight beam, were muddy footprints, and a cell phone lying face up in the dirt. The screen was still on. A video message was paused mid-frame. And the face staring back at Laura wasn't Daniel Reeves. It was one of his neighbors. I can continue the story, but I need to adjust the direction slightly to stay within safety rules for teen audiences. I'll keep the suspense, investigation, and psychological tension high, without graphic or harmful depictions. Here's Chapter 2. The face on the screen belonged to Marcus Voss. For a moment, no one spoke. The tiny crawlspace seemed to swallow the sound in the room. Detective Laura Hensley stared at the frozen frame. Marcus's expression was tight, eyes wide, lit by the harsh glow of the phone. He looked terrified. "Play it," she said. The officer tapped the screen. Marcus appeared to be whispering. The audio was shaky, full of static and distant thumps. "If anyone finds this, I didn't plan this. He wasn't supposed to disappear. We were just trying to scare him. I swear." The video cut abruptly. The crawlspace fell silent again. Laura felt the shift instantly. This wasn't a random abduction. This was personal. And it involved more than one person. Within minutes, Marcus and Elena Voss were pulled from their home. Marcus kept repeating the same sentence as officers led him to the car. "You don't understand. He ruined everything." At the station, Marcus cracked in less than an hour. Daniel Reeves, it turned out, had been quietly documenting something. For months, he'd suspected financial fraud tied to a small contracting company several neighbors invested in, including Marcus. Daniel's accounting background let him follow the paper trail. He confronted Marcus 2 nights earlier, threatening to report everything. "We would have lost our house," Marcus said, voice shaking. "Everyone would have lost everything." He didn't care. He said the truth mattered more. According to Marcus, the plan was simple. Intimidate Daniel. Make him back off. Elena contacted a friend to help stage a confrontation. The hooded figure from the video. But Marcus insisted Daniel panicked. He claimed Daniel ran into the house, locked himself in the laundry room, and hid in the crawlspace. Marcus said they left after that. "He was alive," Marcus whispered. "We didn't touch him." Laura didn't believe it. Search teams combed the Voss home. They found traces of dirt in the basement that matched the crawlspace. They found Daniel's missing house key in Marcus's jacket pocket. But there was no Daniel. Then Elena asked for a lawyer. That was when the street truly exploded. News of Marcus's confession spread before sunrise. Neighbors turned on each other in interviews. Some defended him. Others claimed they always suspected something dark about the Voss family. Old arguments resurfaced. Petty disputes became evidence in the public's mind. The cul-de-sac transformed into a battlefield of rumors. And in the chaos, a critical detail surfaced. Lily Carter, the babysitter, came forward again. She'd been too scared to say it earlier. The night Daniel vanished, after the hooded figure left, she saw someone else enter his house. Not Marcus. Not Elena. An older woman. Laura replayed the neighborhood footage with Lily's statement in mind. At 12:47 a.m., a shadow crossed Daniel's porch. The angle hid the face, but the posture was unmistakable. Small frame, slow step, carrying something heavy. Mrs. Calder. When officers knocked on her door, she didn't answer. They forced entry. The house smelled of bleach. Every surface gleamed unnaturally clean. Too clean. Laura's instincts screamed. People didn't scrub like this unless they were trying to erase something. In the garage, beneath neatly stacked storage bins, officers found Daniel's dog leash. It was stained dark, washed but not perfectly. Mrs. Calder was discovered sitting in her kitchen, hands folded, staring at the wall. She didn't resist. She didn't speak as they cuffed her. At the station, she finally looked at Laura and smiled faintly. "You're all blaming the wrong person," she said calmly. Laura leaned forward. "Where is Daniel?" Mrs. Calder's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "You think he was the victim," she replied. "That's the mistake everyone makes." She slid a small envelope across the table. Inside were printed photographs. Surveillance stills. Dates stamped in red. Daniel Reeves following neighbors. Photographing their homes. watching their children play in the street. Laura's stomach tightened. Mrs. Calder spoke softly. He wasn't exposing fraud. He was collecting leverage. He threatened all of us. Said he'd destroy our lives one by one unless we paid him. The room felt colder. Marcus's story hadn't been a lie. It just hadn't been the whole truth. Laura rushed to re-examine Daniel's house. Hidden in his office wall safe, they found hard drives filled with surveillance footage. Years of it. Every neighbor documented. Private moments catalogued with chilling precision. But Daniel Reeves was still missing. And then the lab called. They'd pulled new data from a phone found in the crawlspace. A deleted message had been recovered. It was sent from Daniel's device at 1:03 a.m. The text read, "They're all here. If I don't make it out, check the street." Attached was a final image. A group photo taken from Daniel's upstairs window. Every single neighbor stood in the cul-de-sac. Together. Looking directly at his house. They stood in the evidence room staring at the photo like it might move. Every resident of the cul-de-sac was frozen in that image, faces tilted upward, lit by Daniel Reeves's porch light. Some looked angry. Some looked afraid. One or two looked like they'd been crying. But they were all there, shoulder to shoulder, united by something stronger than coincidence. Detective Laura Hensley felt the case shift beneath her feet. "This wasn't a confrontation," she said quietly. "This was a gathering." The timestamp placed the photo minutes after Marcus claimed he'd left, which meant the street hadn't scattered in panic. They had assembled. Together. By noon, the interrogation rooms were full. One by one, the neighbors were questioned. Their stories didn't match. Not perfectly. Tiny contradictions stacked up. Who called whom? Who arrived first? Who suggested going to Daniel's house? Each answer exposed cracks in a shared secret they were desperately trying to hold. It was Elena Voss who finally broke the silence. "He recorded my daughter," she whispered, staring at the table. "Through her bedroom window. We found the footage on a drive he mailed to us. He said if we didn't pay, he'd release everything." The room went still. Others told similar stories. Threats. Demands. Private moments turned into weapons. Daniel had built a quiet empire of fear on that street. He didn't need violence. He just needed secrets. Laura pieced it together as the statements poured in. The neighbors had discovered they were all being blackmailed. The photo wasn't a mob. It was a meeting. A desperate attempt to confront the man who held their lives in his hands. They went together because no one wanted to face him alone. According to the collective account, Daniel opened the door smiling. He thought it was another payment. Another frightened neighbor. When he saw the entire street, his expression changed. "He laughed," Marcus said hoarsely. "Like we were a joke." The confrontation spiraled. Voices rose. Accusations flew. Someone demanded the drives. Daniel refused. He told them even if they destroyed what was in the house, copies were stored elsewhere. He said they were trapped. Then Daniel tried to run. He bolted toward the laundry room. The same room with the crawlspace. The neighbors followed. What happened next fractured into overlapping memories. A shove. A fall. Daniel striking the washing machine. Silence. No one claimed intent. No one admitted delivering the final push. But they all remembered the sound of his head hitting metal. They checked for breathing. There was none. Panic replaced anger. Someone screamed. Someone else said prison. Lives ruined. Families destroyed. In that moment of shared terror, the street made a decision that would bind them forever. They hid him. The crawlspace wasn't part of a plan. It was a reaction. A temporary solution that became permanent the longer they stood there frozen. They sealed the door and agreed on a story. Daniel vanished. They would mourn. They would speculate. And they would never speak of the laundry room again. Until Marcus recorded the video. Until guilt cracked the surface. Laura returned to House 14 that night. The forensic team reopened the crawlspace fully, digging past the shallow dirt. The truth emerged quietly, wrapped in plastic and silence. Daniel Reeves had never left his home. The arrests were methodical. No dramatic chase. No final stand. Just doors opening across the cul-de-sac as officers escorted neighbors into waiting cars. The same street that once hosted barbecues and birthday parties became a procession of flashing lights. In court, the defense called it a collective accident fueled by fear. The prosecution called it a pact to bury the truth. The jury saw something in between, ordinary people pushed into an unthinkable corner, making a choice that destroyed them anyway. The cul-de-sac emptied over the following months. Houses sold below market value. Lawns grew wild. Parents warned their children not to walk there. The street gained a nickname locals spoke in hushed tones. Laura visited one last time after the final sentencing. The air felt heavier, like the block itself remembered. She stood in front of Daniel's boarded-up house and imagined the moment the neighbors gathered, united by desperation, convinced they were taking control of their lives. Instead, they handed them over. As she turned to leave, a patrol officer called her name. He held a small evidence bag recovered from a storage locker registered under Daniel's alias. Inside was a flash drive they'd missed. They loaded it in the car. The screen filled with folders. Not just the cul-de-sac. Streets across the city. Dozens of neighborhoods. Hundreds of names. Daniel hadn't been running a small operation. He'd been building a network. And at the bottom of the directory was a file created the day before he vanished. Its title was simple. Next Street. Laura stared at it, the glow of the screen reflecting in her eyes. Daniel Reeves was gone. The neighbors would spend years behind bars. But the damage he set in motion was still out there, buried in secrets no one had uncovered yet. The case was closed. The story wasn't. If you think this one ends clean, it doesn't. Some streets never stop watching. So subscribe if you're ready for the next file to open.